I'm going to walk you through good Demon Hunter builds to use in Diablo Immortal. So there's different builds for different play styles. Are you doing PvP? Are you doing PvE? Are you a solo play? Are you playing in a group? If you're playing in a group, what's your role in the group? Like, these things all matter when you're deciding your build. There's not like a one-size-fits-all, this is literally the best for everything build. So I'm going to walk you through some ideas for builds. I'm going to give you a really versatile build to use for solo play and for group play. We're going to talk about some PvP play and stuff like that, and builds and different skills and how they change in PvP. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. First, let's look at your primary attacks. There's crossbow shot and explosive arrow. Now, generally speaking, explosive arrow is just better, period. There is an exception, though. There's an essence you can get that makes crossbow shot penetrate enemies, and then it's more versatile and it's okay. It's viable then. But explosive arrow is generally better for simplicity. It's just more straightforward and easier to farm mobs and clear mobs with it while still having to be versatile across multiple aspects, bosses, and all sorts of stuff. Next up is a mobility skill. Your choices are daring, swing, or escape. I highly recommend having at least one of these, because otherwise, if you get caught somewhere, you're just going to die. If you're in PvP, escape is going to be better. Escape is just going to be so much better in PvP. And daring swing is still decent though, but in PvE, daring swing is great because not only does it do damage, but also it is really good mobility to get away, and you get 2 charges. Additionally, there is a thing you can get, an essence you can get on your shoulders that makes daring swing an actually crazy DPS ability in PvE. Probably PvP too if you could get someone to stand in it, but they're not just going to stand in it. Is Icy Path, which then makes it do an icy path that does damage over time and slows enemies. So to show you what I mean, if once you have that on, if you do this, enemies that stand in that path take damage over time. So it just dramatically increases the effectiveness of this ability as not only escape but as a damage ability. And since you have 2 of them, you can use one aggressively and then fight the enemies that are in it, and then save the other one for an emergency, whichever way you want to play it. But either way, highly recommend having at least one of these movement abilities just for survivability and a more versatile build. But if you do want to go all glass cannon, we can talk about that in a moment. So I'm going to go through some of these abilities. Impale generally sucks. It's pretty bad. There's not really any essences that make it good, in my opinion. So I generally just avoid it. And then Knife Trap is a really unbelievably good skill for PvE. When you're fighting mobs, when you're fighting bosses, its DPS is amazing. Its versatility and usability is great. The way that you use it is so good for normal mobs. If you're doing Elder Rifts or dungeons where you can place it and then keep moving and not get killed while doing it. It's very versatile, consistent, easy damage that's actually extremely high damage at the same time. Good AoE. It's just a really good versatile ability. So in the, what I originally alluded to, a versatile all-around build that's good for PvE, that you will be able to go into a group or solo play and be effective. We're already down to explosive arrow, daring swing, and knife trap as your first 3 things to use. But we still got 2 other abilities. So what would they be? Well, just to finish off the versatile build, then we'll look back at some of these other skills. The overall versatile build, again, explosive arrow, daring swing, knife trap, and then it's generally going to be Rain of Vengeance for insane mob clear and insane DPS, even on bosses. And the reason this is because of the small cast time on top of the damage. So even if you're fighting a boss, you have to think about how long do your auto attacks stop in order for you to cast your ability. And you'll only lose like 1 auto attack, a primary attack, in order to cast it. And then it's going to do like 5 times the damage of your primary attack or more in that same time. And also clear the mobs that the boss summons, because most bosses will summon mobs. And as soon as they summon mobs, you can throw down your Rain of Vengeance on the boss, and then all the mobs you spawned will just die. And so it's a really useful ability. And then when you're clearing normal mobs, it's just great. You group up enemies, throw down Rain of Vengeance while shooting explosive arrows into them, and the whole giant cluster of enemies just dies super easy, insanely easy. And then if you're doing a versatile build that can pretty much just carry you through PvE without really having to think much and not having a lot of risk, it's just really good all around. Sentry, unbelievably good. And later on, you can get from your main hand, there is an essence you can get that'll make it so you can have 3 sentries instead of 2, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I have a feeling someday they will nerf this ability because of how overpowered this ability is. And there are other essences you can get for this, and we'll talk about essences in just a moment, that can make this even crazier. So, Sentry, if you aren't familiar with Demon Hunter, you can place these turrets. Normally there's 2, but if you have that essence, you can actually place 3. While you're fighting enemies or a boss, they'll just fire at that enemy and do obscene amounts of damage. Now, this is extremely important for bosses. If you can get a boss to leave the turrets alone and just take the damage, the amount of DPS you're going to do is probably higher than any other class in the entire game. It's unbelievable the amount of damage that these turrets can do on top of you attacking a boss. It's just crazy. So, for the sake of single target clear, even if you have an elite enemy that's just really strong, you clear out the weak mobs and then you throw down 3 turrets and then that elite mob just dies like instantly. It's crazy how much damage Sentry does. So for an all-around versatile build that does good damage, good mob clear, good boss clear, and has good survivability, that is the go-to build. These abilities are just the best ones. They're safe to use while getting the highest damage and all that. But really quick, let's talk about some of these other abilities so you know what's up with these. So, knockback shot. This one is something that will generally be better in PvP than PvE, because in PvE it just doesn't do enough for you. It doesn't do enough damage. The knockback, there's some arguments to be made of you can knock back a group of enemies into another group and then follow up with Rain of Vengeance, but it's kind of just overkill, kind of unnecessary, but you could kind of, but then you'd be giving up one of these other abilities that are just so much better in a versatile build. But in PvP, the big selling point isn't even the damage. On top, well, the damage is kind of there because it's so sudden, although I don't have the correct thing on it. I have to take my gear off. Okay, so I took that off so we can see the one you actually want. So this one, the main thing is at closer ranges, it's so sudden that you'll probably hit it no matter what on an actual player. And then the other factor for it is that if you can hit someone into a wall with it, it will stun them for 3 seconds. That's a really long time to be stunned. So for PvP, knockback shot actually would be very high on my ranking just because stun is so overpowered in any video game ever for PvP. So if you ever can manage to knock someone into a wall with it, it's good, and at close range, it's so sudden that they're not going to react to it. It's no matter what, going to hit them for the most part. Really powerful PvP skill, but in PvE, it falls flat. So keep that in mind, whichever way you want to build. Are you doing PvP or doing PvE? Those are your considerations for whether or not to use knockback shot. Multi-shot, on the other hand, not so good. It would be good in PvP because it's so hard to dodge and you'd be able to get consistent damage. So PvP, I'd say it's actually a viable option depending on what playstyle you want to go with. But in PvE against mobs and bosses, its DPS actually just sucks. And its cooldowns are too long for how little damage it does. It's just not the damage that you want. And you would think, well, it's AoE, so it's going to be really easy to hit enemies, but it actually doesn't seem to work out that way. Getting enemies lined up in a good cone in front of you is actually a little bit harder than you would think. I know I've tried it a bunch of times, and it's just kind of weird trying to line them up just right for that ability. It never seems to quite work out just right consistently. So on top of it not doing enough damage, it's a little wonky to use, and there are just better options like the ones I already talked about for PvE. But again, in PvP, multi-shot is great for just tagging people with consistent damage. That's very hard to dodge. So very good in PvP, in my opinion. We already talked about Rain of Vengeance, Sentry. So Smokescreen. Now, Smokescreen is where things get really weird because the vanilla Smokescreen, meaning basic, like unchanged Smokescreen, kind of just sucks. It's really dumb. When you use it, nobody can target you for 2.5 seconds. The problem is you can still get hit by AoE type abilities and stuff. So if a boss, for example, throws a circle on the ground, use Smokescreen, it's just going to hit you anyway. It's not going to do anything for you. Like, it'll make mobs just stand around for 2.5 seconds, but it's like the only time it's viable in PvE is you're about to die and you put it down and you're about to die to mobs, not bosses. You're about to die to mobs. And you throw it down and they all stop targeting you. Even the boss, he will stop targeting you as well. But if he was already throwing down an AoE, you're just going to get hit by it, and that's it. So it's just, there's better abilities. It just sucks. But it gets weird when we get to essence transfers, and we'll get to that again in just a moment. Let's get through all these abilities, though. Now, in PvP, like, maybe you could make it work. I feel like there are better options for your abilities, at least using it as vanilla and with some basic essence upgrades on it. But we changed the ability entirely with Essence, which we'll get to in a second, and then we'll revisit it. But the basic version of it, I cannot recommend it. It's just not good enough compared to some of these other abilities. So spinning chakram, I don't know if that's how you say it or not. So spinning chakram, is that it? Anyway, this thing sounds so good on paper, and the amount of damage it does is actually really, really good. And there's an essence you can get that would make it really, really good. But there's really a time and a place for it, and that's only if you're playing in a party and you have a roll of max DPS and someone else is using taunt. I think there's a taunt gem. You can get legendary gem that's basically a taunt gem. And if somebody's doing that, then yeah, okay, you could do it because you can then just stand still. The problem with this thing is you have to catch it. You see how it comes back to me? If you don't catch it, you lose the cooldown, and then its DPS sucks. If you just throw one and then get the cooldown, the DPS is terrible on the thing. But if you can just throw it back to back to back and catch it over and over and over again, then it's really good. So in theory, you think, oh, well, what's so bad about that? Well, the problem is when you have to move. So if you're fighting a boss solo, or if you're in a party and it's just kind of erratic, you're not in a set party and you're still moving a lot, what happens is if you throw it and you're moving, it will redirect in that direction and it won't even line up correctly. It actually comes up short and stuff. So it's catching it is really weird. And what's even worse is if you're forced to move certain ways, like you're trying to dodge abilities and you can't go there, well, you just missed it and you can't catch it. It's just so inconsistent that it's only good if you are in a preset group, for PvE at least, where you can, no matter what, just stand still. Somebody else is taunting the boss. You don't have to worry about moving, and you can just throw it over and over and over again while shooting. That's pretty good. The DPS is actually really high, and there's an essence we can get that makes it even better that we can talk about after we go through these last abilities. And there's a lot of changes that can really mix things up, and then, you know, there's actually a way it might be good in solo play too with one of the essences, which we'll get to in a moment. So we got 2 left to look at. So we got Strafe. Now Strafe, it just sounds so good, but it's just not. It just sucks. And like, maybe even PvP, maybe you can do it because it could consistently hit people, but at the same time, you are going to get hit if you use it in PvP, so you're probably just going to get farmed. And in PvE, a similar problem of you're very likely to get hit a bunch while using it, but the bigger problem is it actually just doesn't do very much damage. And like, there are essences you can get to make it different or better in some ways, but it's still just not as good as those other choices I talked about earlier in the video. It's not better than Rain of Vengeance in my opinion. It's not as versatile and safe as Rain of Vengeance. It's not as good as the traps. It's just really a weak skill overall. And then we have Vengeance. Now this one's actually a viable option if you want to just do a different build, or you have a plan in mind, or you want to get all the essences for this and play a certain way, or if you really want the passive, which the passive is really fun in PvE. I mean, to be honest, it's actually insanely fun passive to run. It doesn't sound like much, 30%, but it feels like 200%. It actually feels so much faster than it sounds. So Vengeance, it's an interesting skill. It's a buff skill, and it makes it so for 6 seconds, every primary attack shoots 2 additional shots for significantly less damage than the normal shots. But the way they shoot are like laser beams that just fly out like the chakram or whatever. So you can actually, in Elder Rifts, it's really fun because you can line enemies up in narrow passageways and then fire down the passageways and hit all of them with it. And it's okay, decent for mob clear, and the movement speed passive is nice for survivability. Like, it's okay. It's a viable option. If you really want it, you can make it work, okay? And in PvP, though, I'm not so sure it's going to be great. I mean, the passive's not going to be as powerful without a full 10 enemies around and stuff like that. And then, is it really going to bring that much to the table? Like, I have questions about whether this will even be reasonable to use in PvP long term. But you can try if you want. I just don't see any benefit to it. So those are the abilities. A quick summary of which ones to build. And just to summarize again, the versatile build for any situation, not having set groups, Explosive Arrow, Daring Swing, Knife Trap, Rain of Vengeance, and then Sentry for boss clear. Okay, that's Rain of Vengeance. To summarize, Explosive Arrow, mob clear and DPS. Daring Swing, survivability and DPS. Knife Trap, a mob clear and boss DPS. And mob DPS. Rain of Vengeance, mob clear and DPS. Sentry, DPS, and also you can use it as distractions when you're being overwhelmed by enemies, and they'll all run to the sentry sometimes, and then you can get some of the mobs off you and split them up, and it's survivability too. So survivability and DPS from the sentry. Then also you could swap out Vengeance for whichever one of these you want to give up depending on your playstyle. If you like the Vengeance and you want to go for it, and then Spinning Chakram, if you're in a set group who has a taunt gem and the bosses and things are not going to target you, they just need DPS, then this DPS is actually nuts if you can just stand still and use it, especially when there are essences that we'll get to, and Smokescreen we'll talk about in a second with essences. So essences, this is really important, essences for builds. Like, you don't even want to think of a build unless you know what the essences do. So there's an essence for every single piece if you don't know. You can obviously only have one at a time for each piece, so I can only have one head, one active at a time. But there are different ones that do different things. For example, there's multiple Vengeance ones, and we have this one, for example, which, the Vision of the Lost, it makes it so every enemy you defeat with Vengeance will increase the duration of Vengeance by 0.2 seconds, up to a max of 2.4. So instead of being a 6-second ability, it can turn into an 8.4-second ability, which makes it way better for mob clear. And there's other reasons to get it too, but it's if you're working towards Vengeance, that's a great one to get. Another one that's really nice to get for survivability and DPS, especially if you have the other one that I have, the Frost Path. I think it's on the shoulders. We'll get to in a sec. For the swing, so it's like a DPS AoE skill. You can get this one to get another charge on the swing, and then you can use it more aggressively. You have two that you can use aggressively while keeping one in your back pocket in case you get body blocked and don't want to die. But then we got other ones where, and I haven't tested these ones in particular, but I have a feeling that these might be totally OP, but it just depends on how it affects. So like Sentry now fires mortars that explode, damage all enemies in the area, and I wonder, that's going to make those way better for mob clear, but how does it do to the Sentry's total DPS versus the normal shot? Because in my opinion, for me, Sentries, my main focus on Sentries is either a distraction, or when I'm fighting a boss, it does absurd boss DPS, and that's really what Sentry's for. So if this decreases the total DPS, then I personally wouldn't use it because it's just so good for single target clear, and that's really what the Sentries are all about. And we have this other Sentry one, which makes it so they fire massive shells that deal damage and knock enemies away, but the maximum number is decreased. So this one's like a survivability type one, and it just throws enemies around and stuff. I don't know what the damage is like compared to base. That's really what the hinge point would be. So if you get it and you test it and you see the damage is not as good or whatever, that's how you can make a decision about which way you want to go about it. But yeah, it turns Sentry into a survivability thing. If you combo it with the other one that's on the main hand, that makes you have an additional Sentry charge, then you can have two of these up with this one. So you can decrease it by one, then increase it by one, have two that do, CC. And, that might make it more viable in PvP. Having that knock enemies away thing in PvP could actually be really nice, just to displace people and throw them around and stuff. The other Sentry one here is it becomes a power with frost, damaging and chilling enemies, which would be okay in PvP if you're trying to use Sentry in PvP. I don't know if it makes it do more damage or not. If it does more damage, it's great. If not, I'd probably rather go for one of these other ones, like the Daring Swing one or whatever. It's just not so great. Multi-shot damage, this would actually be good for PvP because multi-shot is such consistent damage in PvP that's easy to hit, and anything you can do to increase that damage would be nice. So, it just depends. Are you doing PvP or not? And then you take that into account. Also, though, the same issue in PvP, survivability is huge. Movement abilities are huge in PvP in any video game, so this one's also one to consider in PvP, so you have one more escape to dodge an ability. These are all things to consider in your builds. And we're getting to a point now, and you're starting to see, in Diablo Immortal, there's so many modifiers to these things that it changes everything. So it's like there is no such thing as, hey, use these 4 abilities and you will be the best player on the server in PvP solo play, PvE group play, and in PvP. Like, that's just not going to happen. You're going to have to look at this, and you're going to have to take what I'm telling you and then make your own decisions for your own playstyle. Are you a PvP player and you don't even care at PvE and you never even think about it? Then you're going to be building certain ways. You really got to take what I'm telling you and then make your own decision. I'm trying to do my best input here for you so you know what each thing does in respect to each build, so that you'll know whether or not you want to build it for what you are playing with or what way you like to play, because there really is so much diversity. That's really how it's going to go. So we got on the shoulders, multi-shot also fires 2 homing rockets. Sounds awful. PvP, maybe. You could test it in PvP. It just still sounds like it wouldn't be that good, but maybe it'd force someone into uncomfortable positions with the homing rocket. It depends on how strong the arc of the homing is on the rocket, but that's hard to know without seeing it. And then Rain of Vengeance summons waves of shadow beasts that dash forward. Now, I want to test this, but I had to instead. There's a point in the game where you get to pick a shoulder, and instead I went with the Daring Swing one, so I didn't get to test this one, but it was like my second choice because in theory, if it's doing Rain of Vengeance and an additional damage of the flying shadow beasts that drop bombs in the area, then that's great. Now, if it replaces it with them dropping bombs in the area, it's questionable at best. It depends on how it works exactly. So, you know, this is one that, unfortunately, I don't have. The game's been out for 3 days, and I haven't had time to collect literally all the essences in the game, but it's one I would definitely consider because Rain of Vengeance is a huge, powerful ability, but at the same time, Daring Swing, oh god, having the ice thing is insanely good for PvE, and maybe even in PvP, making that ability have, you know, just be able to zone is so good in PvP that I don't know that anything else in here is really going to be that great compared to that. And then this one, Rain of Vengeance instead summons a flying shadow beast that continually drops bombs in the area, is not going to be good because it's going to replace it with the bombs in the area, as opposed to this one's doing additional ones. So assuming that is what that is and this is what this is, then it depends on how it works, but I just have a feeling that that's not going to be good. But I'd have to test it. It's too hard to know. If you get it, you can check it out and compare it, because Rain of Vengeance is a strong ability. Definitely consider it. It just depends on how it modifies it. And then this one is garbage. No matter what, Knife Trap's a great ability, but this doesn't do anything. Because generally, Knife Trap is an ability that you're going to be constantly using if you're actually good at the game, basically. It's rare that you're just going to hold all your knife traps for very long. You're just going to be using them pretty often. And so having an extra one doesn't really matter. It doesn't decrease how often you get it. It doesn't increase your DPS with the knife trap in an actual continuous fight. It just doesn't seem, it's just not worth compared to these other options. And we got Rain of Vengeance becomes empowered with frost, damaging and chilling enemies. If this might be okay for PvP, because then if you throw it down, a melee guy's trying to jump, you throw it at your feet, and then you jump away, and now he's slowed in the Rain of Vengeance. You could use that to your advantage. In PvE, it increases survivability, but it's nobody really cares that much. It's like, I'd rather just have raw DPS and something more important. But PvP, that change to it could be huge. So it's definitely a consideration if you're going to use Rain of Vengeance in PvP. Definitely think about that one, because that one definitely could... you could definitely get some outplays with that for sure. And then Rain of Vengeance instead summons bomb-dropping shadow beasts that damage and stun enemies. Again, another replacement for PvP. In PvE, I don't know that the stun matters. Mobs are not that dangerous, generally speaking, and then bosses can't be stunned generally, so PvE, I'd say it's probably worthless for the most part. PvP, though, this sounds like it could be OP as hell. It just depends on the patterns and stuff of it, but stun is key in any video game. If you ever can get a stun, so, you know, think about that one. This was another one I talked about Spinning Chakram, and this one will just increase its DPS, because this one's charges, that just makes it do more DPS, because you throw it, then you gotta wait for the cooldown, and it's just gonna make you get to throw it one more time before waiting for the cooldown, so it actually is increasing its DPS overall. So if you just want to be a glass cannon DPS, and you have this is only for if you have the set group that's gonna make it so you can just stand still. If you have that, this is great. This does the work. You could definitely consider that if you want to. And then we get 2 chest pieces. Knockback shot fires mortar in the sky is awful. I tried. It's just terrible. It's just awful. Like it literally just makes the skill worse. I personally would not recommend. Rain of Vengeance duration increased. That's pretty significant for PvE. PvP, it could have power if you're trying to zone out an area in a narrow pass with the stun one or something like that. And you want it to last that a little bit longer. It could give you the edge. Definitely possible. Strafe sucks. Just damage alone, just garbage. It's if you get this, you have to pair it with one of the ones that ups the power of strafe, or else strafe is just dumb. And then knife trap damage increased is okay, but it's like 10% is not that crazy, so I personally wouldn't go for it. Knife arming time decreased. This would be if you're trying to use knife trap in PvP, but it's still going to be... I don't know, this is like, someone jumps you, a melee guy jumps you in PvP, you immediately throw it down, and you jump away, and if he does not have a movement ability, he might not be able to get out of the circle in time if you have this. So if you want to use knife trap in PvP, you could try this, because in PvP, it's like, everything that you do, if someone's not used to a demon hunter who builds this way, they're not going to be expecting it, and you can make them fall right into your trap, no pun intended. And so you can, which way there's multiple builds for PvP, and it's all about outplaying your opponent with something they're not expecting. So this is one of those ones where you could, reverse trap card your opponent with a trick, and they would not be expecting it. You could try it, but we'll just. I haven't seen the actual timing myself on is it actually that viable in that way or not. But if you test it and it is, then that's a trick you can throw in PvP that'd be really viable in some ways. Now here we get to smokescreen. Here's where things get weird. So smokescreen now creates thicker, longer lasting smoke that maintains concealment while you are in it. However, you will be briefly visible each time you attack. And I really wonder how this combos with the other smokescreen ones that we'll get to in these last 3 tabs, because there's ones that change smokescreen into a grenade. So I'm not sure how that one would even combo with that. But it's still the same old garbage smokescreen. It's not that helpful in my opinion, unless I'm just missing something obvious on smokescreen. It just seems like doo-doo. So I would not recommend unless I'm missing something obvious. Then this one, knockback shot, does frost and it leaves a frozen trail in its path that damages and chills enemy. Now this is actually really good if you really want to use knockback shot in PvE. Then this is gonna make it more viable. And in PvP even, if you want to build that way, if you think that is going to be your go-to build and it's going to knock someone back and slow them and that's going to help you somehow, it's a possibility in PvP. It just going to depend on which way you want to build in PvP. This one is Vengeance cooldown decreased by 15. So if you combo this one with that one I showed earlier for Vengeance lasting longer when you kill enemies, then you can get that Vengeance timing to where the uptime, instead of being like 33%, the uptime can be like 60% on Vengeance. So again, if you want to build into Vengeance, this is what I was talking about. There's a way to build into Vengeance using Essence. So let's go to the pants. So knife traps now do frost. So I don't know if it increases DPS. If it does, it's decent. But this would probably be more for PvP to try to slow people. And it would combo well with that arming time one in PvP. Because if you can actually catch them with it and slow them, that could be helpful. Then we got this one. So here we go. Where smokescreen starts to get weird. It's one of the options. So smokescreen instead throws a gas bomb at a location, continually damaging all nearby enemies. Now, PvE sounds great. PvP, probably terrible because they'll just walk out of the gas bomb, right? In PvP, you want the sudden burst damage because other people just get out of it. And then this one, I haven't seen it yet to see the damage. I hope the damage is high. If the damage is high, this could replace the trap ability in PvE or something, because it just depends on the damage. Because now it's a grenade and you can have 2 of them. You just chuck out grenades. Then suddenly smokescreen doesn't sound so bad. It actually doesn't sound so bad then. It just depends on the damage. I've not been able to see it, unfortunately, and there's no videos out there that I can find that show the damage. But if that damage is high enough, like 3,000 to 4,000 per grenade, it'd be okay. And PvP against other players, this might be OP. It depends on, again, I don't know how the ability actually plays out. If it explodes and throws fast enough, it might be consistent damage that you can easily land on somebody. And if so, it's good. And if it's a really slow one where it lobs it and it takes like 3 seconds to go through the air, not going to be so good anymore. So if you have this, try it out. And, if it's a fast throw, it's going to be good for PvP then. If it goes slowly, it's going to suck in PvP. But if the damage is high, it's going to be good in PvE regardless of the speed. So just keep that in mind if you have it and you're testing it out. Because I can't. It's just, there's nothing on the internet yet. I can't really go through it yet. Knife trap becomes immolation trap, burning the ground and all nearby enemies when detonated. Now this could be really good for PvE. I haven't tested it because again I don't have it, but on paper this could be really good for upping that DPS of knife trap and making it a much more viable skill. If you have it, check it out and see, and if it does way more DPS, then it just does more DPS and it's just better. So yeah, think about that one. Now here, if we're talking about that Vengeance build I was talking about, if you also get this one with the Vengeance, and you get the other ones with Vengeance, Vengeance build is viable. Without all of them, though, Vengeance is like really shoddy at best. But once you get all those other ones, so the uptime's like 66% of the time or so, then you get this one, and when you have Vengeance, even your other abilities do more damage. And even the basic attacks do more damage. So that's where suddenly it's like, it starts to go over the line onto viability in PvE. In PvP, I still just don't think it's probably not, it's almost definitely not very good in PvP, okay? I would not recommend. But in PvE, you get all that. If you want a Vengeance build and you get all that, it's going to be good. It's actually going to be pretty good. And then this one, if you get the other smokescreen one and have it as a grenade, and if it leaves a smokescreen and throws grenades, and then this, it's just, again, smokescreen is such a weird one. It does more damage. No matter what crit, basically, after smokescreen concealment ends, but it's just not viable in my opinion. Like, maybe in PvP, maybe. This could make it so you could use normal vanilla smokescreen PvP, and maybe it would have some kind of benefit for you, but it's just such a long shot. It would be one of those ones of trying to throw someone off and they're not expecting it is your best bet with that, in my opinion. PvP. PvE, I just can't see it. I'm just not seeing it. Anyway, enemies hit by spinning chakram will suffer 4% additional damage if hit again by this chakram in a short time. Now, this builds into that chakram build, so if you were wanting to do spinning chakram, you have a PvE group where you can actually just stand still and throw it on bosses, then, yeah, you combo that with the other one, it's going to be nuts. Because that's also going to make them do... well, it's only going to do additional damage for the chakram. I thought it was all damage, but yeah, so it's still good, though. It's going to make that chakram do crazy damage, actually. I mean, that damage is going to get nuts. And then, instead of all damage with Vengeance, you could also do this one to finish off the Vengeance, which is, during Vengeance, every 2 primary attacks will cause you to launch 1 additional rock, so just more DPS. So one or the other. I would lean towards the 6% damage, but, you know, maybe this one would be better. It just, I don't know, whatever you think. They're probably going to come up close to the same total DPS. All right, we got 2 tabs left. We got main weapon and secondary weapon. So we have Strafe launches homing rockets that deal small amounts of damage to a nearby enemy. Not very good, but if you want to use Strafe, you're going to have to get this or one of the Strafe ones because vanilla Strafe just sucks. Multi-shot now fires flaming arrows that damage and burn enemies. Oh my gosh, PvP, this one is amazing because you just tag someone with a dot. It's just so easy to tag someone with this, and now they have a burn on them. That is really, really strong. Very powerful in PvP. Even in PvE, if you want to use multi-shot, this is a must-have because it's going to make it do more damage. And then Rain of Vengeance damage increased. That's decent. Multi-shot now fires frost arrows, so if this is also good for PvP. PvE, I don't really see it, but PvP, you just want to, like, someone's chasing you and you just quickly throw it and it slows them, and now they can't chase you as well. That could help. Definitely think about that in your builds. It's definitely an option. That's a really powerful option. Just because how easy it is to tag someone with that. Then we got this one I go for PvE against normal enemies. This one's just busted, man. You just get that extra sentry and the damage is off the charts. It's nuts, man. It's so crazy. Then, smokescreen cooldown decreased by 15%, only if you have the grenade, probably. And even then, it just depends. I still don't know the damage of the grenade. The damage of the grenade is just, like, absolutely insane. Then this would be crazy to combo with. Strafe duration increased by 30%. Nah, it's just not good. Like, it's that, or have Strafe do more damage. Well, Strafe needs more damage, or it's garbage, so that's useless, in my mind. Sentry also launches a rock every 2 attacks, dealing an additional 299 damage. Super unbelievably OP. Unbelievably OP, but at the same time, I really need to stop and do the math on this once I get that essence. Which one actually does more DPS? Having a 3rd turret, or having the 2 turrets or having 2 turrets and each one doing, I guess that's going to come up to like 40% additional damage, because 299 is less than the 3 something they hit right now. So like, it's going to be close. It's going to be close. It just depends, okay? So that's what I'm not sure about, but either or are both absurdly good. If you don't have one, you just have the other, just use whichever one you have. They're both insane. Last tab here. All right, let's get through these last ones. So, Strafe instead throws explosive grenades, each damaging all nearby enemies. Haven't tried it, but it might make Strafe viable. It just depends on the ability itself, the way it throws grenades, the damage your grenades do, the explosion radius of the grenades. Like, there's so many factors. But only in PvE. In PvP, like, maybe, but probably not. It's just not going to be consistent enough. It's not going to be where you want to aim it. You're going to be slowed down, so you're going to get farmed, like, because you're not moving, basically. So just really, really risky one to try to go for. Maybe you could try it. I just on paper, I'm not seeing it. This one, I think is useless. Like, if your sentries blow up, they blow up. There's nobody cares, generally. It makes you can use Bloody Chains to connect sentry turrets, and then the sentries don't die as fast. It's just silly. Yeah, so anyway, crossbow shot will now pierce through. This is the one I was talking about, your basic attack. So there's explosive shot and there's crossbow shot. This one makes crossbow shot possible. Without this, don't use crossbow shot. Crossbow shot sucks without this. If you have this, though, then it pierces and it can hit additional enemies. Then it's decent then. It's actually pretty decent then. Strafe now continually fires piercing bolts in a direction. I haven't tried this one. Again, this might make Strafe viable. Maybe. But the DPS is still probably pretty bad, so probably not. And also you're slowed, so it's not as viable. It might make PvP better, but it's just, I don't know. It's questionable at best. You could try it if you want, but it sounds questionable at best. Sentry damage increased by 10%. That is decent. That's pretty good. And then the other ones are explosive arrow now also cause enemy to burn for damage. Now this one is just better. This is my favorite one because for mob clear it's insane. Group them up, just left click them or tap if you're on mobile or controller, whatever button, and you just shoot them and they just die. It increases your DPS for mob clear so much. It's ridiculous. And it just increases your DPS because it just makes you have a constant burn on the enemy you're attacking. Even a boss, just constant burn on them. Then we got Spinning Chakram now fires a stationary chakram that continually damages all nearby enemies but no longer has multiple charges. I want to test this because if this DPS is high enough, then suddenly this is a great ability that's better than Rain of Vengeance or something. I doubt it. I have a feeling the damage is not that great, but it's one of those ones you throw on the ground and then enemies stand in it and they just die. PvE is great. It could be great, maybe. Just depends on the stats. If you have it, test it and see if it does like 6,000 damage by the time it's gone, then it's as good as Rain of Vengeance, although I'd probably still go Rain of Vengeance. But PvP, probably bad. Enemies just walk out of it. It's going to be garbage. This one, Spinning Chakram now orbits your location for several seconds, but can no longer have multiple charges. Again, it's just going to come down to the DPS. That does make it a better ability, a more versatile ability in PvE. But I really feel like Spinning Chakram has a specific place in the game where you're playing with a group and they have taunt and a taunt gem on so that you can just stand there and just spam Spinning Chakram at a boss. Then that's what it's meant for. And I feel like these other ones are just not... it's just not as good as some of these other abilities. And last we have gems. I'm not going to take long. These videos are like half an hour long. So best gems generally for an all glass cannon DPS one like the Demon Hunter. Echoing Shade. Well, your attacks have 15% chance to summon a shadow clone for 8 seconds. And later on you can have up to 2 shadow clones at one time. Sounds pretty good to me. Blood-Soaked Jade increases all... Basically, when you're at full health, you do 8% more damage and base and have more movement speed. That's good. And then you also take 2% decreased damage while below 50% life. Decent gem overall. Then you have Seeping Bile. Your attacks have 4% chance to poison enemies. Decent for a DPS build. And then Howler's Call, your primary attacks have a 10% chance to summon a charging Spirit Wolf that inflicts damage and damage to all enemies in the path. And Spirit Wolf has 12% chance to stun enemies for 3 seconds, which PvP, it just depends on how it plays. I actually haven't seen it myself. I can't even find videos on this stuff, guys. When I made this video, this game's been out for like 3 days. So I'm doing my best here, but some of this stuff's like, it's impossible. Unless I wanted to spend like $10,000, which I don't have. If you guys want to give me $10,000, by the way, I'll spend it, and we can look at all this stuff. But anyway, and other than that, there's nothing in the tier 5. So I'm talking about end game stuff. If you don't want tier 5, this is the best one out of all the tier 2 ones. If you're playing with a party and they're doing the thing with the Spinning Chakram, and you can just throw it for whatever, you just stand behind an enemy and just throw it from behind and crit, and just auto attack from behind and crit, and yeah, OP for that purpose. That's everything I got for you guys. That's everything there is to know about Demon Hunter, man. Like, the builds, I wish I could tell you no matter what build this, but this game is not that simple. It's just straight up not that simple. There's essences, there's gems, and it all interplays to determine what you want to play. And there are multiple options based on, do you want to play safer? Do you want to play more aggressive? Do you have a party that's going to keep you safe so you can just stand perfectly still and throw Spinning Chakrams? Like, these are all important things to consider when making your build. But one last time, if you want a one-size-fits-all build for PvE, I will repeat, if you just want a one-size-fits-all for PvE, my no matter 100% recommendation base, without any essences or with minimal essences, or even with a lot of the essences potentially, is Explosive Arrow, Daring Swing, Knife Trap, Rain of Vengeance, and Sentry. And ideally you get the additional Sentry. And that build is so consistent in this game. It's so easy to just go around and place traps and then throw down arrows and then swing over them and slow them and then place a turret to distract them, or just throw down 3 turrets while you just farm the boss and stand on the boss and just place a trap under his feet while attacking him and just farm. Like, it's just consistent, easy, safe. You have high mobility. It does pretty much more damage than all the other abilities in PvE. So that's the build. That is the build. But all these other things are things. Everything else I said in this last 35 minutes are very important because there are other options depending on what's going on in your game. depending on what way you're playing and what way you're with a group or you're doing PvP and all these other factors. So if you were able to suffer through 35 minutes of me talking, now you should have a dramatically better idea of what to build for a Demon Hunter in this game. So hopefully that helps you out. I put a lot of thought into this. I know most of this. I wish I had the money to just buy everything so I could test out all the essences, but pretty good idea on most of them. And also I know the abilities base, so like there's a lot I can glean into that. But anyway, this video should hopefully give you a dramatically better idea of how to build your Demon Hunter in Diablo Immortal.